Hi there, data scamps and data champs. This is Richie. Actually, before I get started, I should mention we're all getting very excited backstage because we just discovered how we can change the font for our names on screen. So we're now using the Fira Mono font. It's actually one of my favorite programming fonts, so getting rather too excited about that. Anyway, on with today's show. So if you work with code, either writing it yourself or reading other people's code, then you need to understand about version control and code repositories. And GitHub's the most popular platform for managing code repositories and working with the Git Version Control tool. So knowing about it is just a useful skill for almost anybody who has any involvement with the code. So if you want a job at a place where GitHub is used, you need to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. And so a qualification is helpful. And today we're going to look at what GitHub certifications are on offer and how you can pass them. So we're going to focus mainly on the first certification, which is called GitHub Foundations. And small spoiler, one of the best ways to pass it is by taking DataCamp's GitHub Foundations track. Our guest is Christopher W. Blake, not to be confused with another Christopher Blake who works with him. So he's a learning advocate and software developer at GitHub. And in his job, he helps develop the learning curriculum and searches for ways to help you love coding. Christopher's got a background in software engineering. He's got over 15 years of experience working in industry. And previously, he was a senior software engineer at Baker Hughes. So given that he's working at GitHub, we're getting information right from the source. So I'm very pleased to welcome you here. Hi, Christopher. Please take it away.
Hey, Richie, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here today and to see how we can support DataCamp and all these data scientists, data engineers, and new people to GitHub and their journey to becoming better coders. A little bit about me. Yeah, Richie said, I've got a lot of experience, 15 years plus in the industry, but I've also been coding and hacking with computers since I was a middle schooler. And I've always loved teaching and helping people. So I'm really happy to be here today. Representing GitHub and showing you all how to become better coders. To get started today, this is a gist that I've shared with everybody. It will be put into the chat, so you guys don't have to necessarily take notes. This will be a good reminder of everything you can do and everything you can learn more about. And it's kind of my guide, so that way I don't forget things. So we'll just kind of walk through it here. To get started, I am going to share a link to this poll in the chat. I don't know. Let me see here. I will let Reese share that. And while that's going, I want to do a quick safety moment. This is just a habit I've had from my past job. I call it a digital safety moment because the world's getting more and more digitally tech crazy, and we have to be more and more careful today. So what is that safety moment? What is juice jacking? So we're just going to take that and type it into Google because I don't know everything. Juice jacking is a cyber attack that involves using a compromised USB charging station to steal personal information or install malware on a computer device. Essentially, what this is saying is when you're out there in the public, you're traveling for the holidays, and your phone's about to die, you just plugged it into a USB port at the airport or maybe waiting at a restaurant or something, and you don't know if that USB port is safe. And you've probably seen the trust this device on your iPhone, maybe. And how many times have you clicked this out of habit and not thought about whether you're trusting or not trusting this? So next time you go out into the world and you need to charge your device, be really careful that you're hitting don't trust every time, because you don't want somebody to be installing or downloading your photos and such from your phone or your iPad. Okay, so let's go and let's take a look at the poll. We'll let that run for a little while, actually, because we don't have a whole lot of responses yet. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. That poll is just a fun little one. What is your favorite naming convention for saving versions of backups? Because if you're new to GitHub, you're probably doing something like this because you haven't found the love that is version control and how much it saves you. Backup 1, 2, 3, temp 1, temp 2, final really, final approved. We've all seen this before. My project final, putting dates on the end. I always like to throw a joke in there. And then maybe you're already familiar with Git, you're just wanting to get a little bit better at it. So go ahead and fill that out. Once I get a fair number of responses, we'll take a look at that and see what people think. Okay, So the main reason why I'm here today is to talk about certifications. How can you get that stamp to make your profile look a little bit better or support your manager in finding more jobs? So GitHub offers 5 certifications. Let's pull those to the side here. They are Foundations, Actions, Admin, Advanced Security, and Copilot. So let's just talk for a few seconds about those. GitHub Foundations is what we're going to hit today. Again, we're not going to get into the technical weeds of it. We're just going to give an awareness level to make you want to go out there and learn more. And there's all kinds of links in here so you can learn that foundation stuff. Additionally, you can just go to the website and click on it. It'll take you to a learning course. DataCamp also has a wonderful learning course. The Foundations course is that fundamental course content, like how to do version control, how do you organize your content into a repository, how do you branch off and create multiple timelines of work so that way you can work in parallel with other people, how do you collaborate, how do you merge 5 people working on the same project without them conflicting with each other, how do you handle bugs, how do you scale that up into projects, right? And then a little bit of the awareness of like what other things can GitHub do for you beyond version control. Now that you have your code here, how can you take advantage of all that being in one spot? And that leads into actions, which I like to just sum it up as automating the boring stuff. Nobody likes to build their code manually. Nobody likes to test their code manually. Nobody likes to manually deploy it to the development environment and the staging environment and then the production environment and hope that they didn't mess up a setting, right? And sharing is caring, right? So there's a lot of pre-made actions out there for you. You don't have to necessarily even know how to do it yourself. There might be one already there. And you can always automate common tasks. Like maybe you're always changing a picture, or maybe you're always replacing text in a document, right? So it can do more than that. The next one is about admin, right? Which is this one here. And this is, acknowledging that you have to work as a team eventually, and you're going to want standards, you're going to want to have policies, you're going to want to have projects and projects. You're going to maybe have to do some government work, and you're going to have to host those runners yourself, or those actions yourself. You can't just use the public ones. Handling billing, accounts, single sign-on, that sort of stuff. Advanced security, that's this one here. We all make mistakes. Everybody does it. We've all accidentally committed a token or put a URL in there because we forgot to add our git ignore, which you'll learn about in a little bit. And how can we solve that as quickly as possible? How can we prevent those from ever happening? And how can we get an overview of our whole coding environment? Maybe your company has thousands of repositories, and you need to get a sense of which ones are the most active, which ones need the most attention. And then finally, our newest toy to the GitHub universe is Copilot. I think this is pretty neat because it's starting to convert natural language into a programming language. So you don't necessarily have to know the syntax anymore. You can just answer with prompts, but you guys are data scientists. You might know this better than even I do. So you can go play with that. Again, that link is right here, and you can see the link up here. Okay, if there's any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and they will trickle the good ones up to me, the ones that I can handle. All right. Okay, we got some responses, so let's take a look at that. Give me a breather here. Oh, there's actually a lot of people already using Git, so that's great. It's pretty even. Nice. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the actual meat of today. Let's focus on this GitHub Foundations course. So the first step is let's look at the DataCamp documentation on this course. I think this is really great. I have a little note down here that says it's actually better than the Microsoft Learn option. I probably didn't say that. You didn't hear me say that. I know it's recorded. So yeah, the Git Version Control, as I mentioned up earlier, it's in a short, it saves you from the poll we just did. This backup 1, backup 2, my project final, source final 2, and then forgetting about it and having to put it on a backup drive, and then making sure the backup drive has a backup that's offsite, that sort of stuff. It's decentralized, which means that it can't be shut down. So if the various different Git services like GitHub were to close shop tomorrow, or were to change their offerings, you could actually continue to work pretty much normal or your code is protected, I should say, because you can do the network share. You can point everything to another service if you need to. So Git is there's a reason why Git has kind of won the version control battle, because it's so flexible and open, which fits perfect with the open source nature that it supports. What does this version control thing do? Why would I want to do it? It enables history, right? So each one of these nodes on here is a chunk of time that you've said, hey, this is something I care about. This is something that's useful. I'm going to put a little description on it, and I want to keep it for the future. It also allows you to do comparing. So you can look at the difference between these two points in history and say, oh, I just changed these variable names, or I added a new method, or added a new feature, right? And then kind of going down in here into this concept of branching, which we'll talk about in a second, it allows parallel development. So I can work on one feature, you can work on a new feature, and we don't mess with each other's code because we're using the same shared folder, or a completely copy. And then we have to do the old school, like high school version of looking at the PowerPoint and combining slides together later, right? It'll do it for us. Yeah, so that is a little bit of just the basics of Git version control. Let's see, well, let's go down here a little bit to, I don't want to get too into the weeds of this with you guys, but essentially you have a repository, right? And you have a bunch of unmodified files in there. You take these files, you change things about them, and Git will detect from the original copy, oh, you've renamed a variable, you've added a line of code, right? And then in your IDE, it'll probably change it like a color orange, so you can see that it's been modified, and you have those there. And then you can combine those into what's called a staging area and say, I renamed the same variable across 10 different files, and now I'm going to put those as a new node on my history, right? And say renamed variable A to variable B, done. And so that's marked as history, right? The way you would do that is all these commands, and DataCamp goes through them really well, does a great job of describing them. I won't describe them today because that's way too technical for today, but this tutorial is wonderful. Go through it, it'll have you play around with each of these commands. Oftentimes you don't need to know these commands anymore because they're in your IDE, like Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, Jupyter, all the JetBrains IDEs, right? Xcode, it handles a lot of this stuff for you nowadays, but it's good to be familiar with it. All right, I think that's enough of the theoretical for today. Again, if there's any questions, throw them in the chat and I will address them. Okay, so let's actually open up GitHub and do something. Like, you guys want to see what GitHub is. So we're going to go create a repository. We're going to create one of these branches that we just talked about here. We're going to change a file through the web interface instead of bringing it local. And then we're going to merge it, right? So let's go to github.com and create a repo. So here is my personal profile. I'm going to go up here and click New Repository. And we'll call this, we'll put this, say this is going to go to my name, DataCamp webinar. Make it public. We'll add a default README file, which is kind of like your home page for the repository. Give that a second. Hopefully, yeah, works for me. Great. So now we have this new public repository. Public means that anybody in the world can see it. Private means only you can see it. And so if you were to go to this URL right now, you could see this repository, and it's created this like landing page for me with a README document. I'm going to go ahead and click edit on this. I'm going to say, I think camel case is the best. And I'm going to remember we talked about this idea of a commit, marking a point in history. So I'm going to go ahead and hit commit and say, added my opinion to the commit as the commit message. It's going to say that I did it. It's going to put it directly into the repository. Hit commit changes. And now I think camel case is the best is on the website for everybody to see. Okay, so what if we need to add a new feature or a couple of us need to work, right? So we talked about this idea of parallel timelines, right? You could think of this main branch as like the sacred timeline in the Marvel universe. And then every time you create a new branch, it's your personal universe to work inside of until you come back to the sacred timeline. So let's create a branch here called Chris W. Blake dash feature 1. And we'll create that. And so it made an exact copy of the original main branch. And let's say another developer thinks snake case is the best. He commits that. And now we have one version of time that says camel case is the best and another that says snake case is the best. Maybe I was clicking a little too fast. I apologize. So on our main branch, which is the sacred timeline, we have camel case. And then if we go to the other branch, the one that we just created to do some new work, we have one where it says snake case is the best. So that's great. We've all decided that snake case is now actually the best. I convinced my colleagues differently. It was a hard fought battle with those old Java developers, but now we're in the Python world. And let's merge this into our new sacred timeline. All right, so how do we do this? This is what's called a pull request. You do your thing, I'll do mine, and we'll combine work later. Right, so let's go up to pull request, and it detected that we have a new parallel timeline running. We'll hit compare. Standardized on variable naming convention. Snake case 1, pun intended. And I spelled 1 wrong. So let's fix that. Okay, and so we can see here, we have this thing called a pull request. Sometimes it's called a merge request. And you can see one version of history versus the other. And so let's go to files changed. And you can see on the right here, it says the original on the left, it says camel case. And then on the right, it says snake case. Let's make that a little bigger, right? And you can see that it highlighted the line green and it highlighted those specific words even darker green. All right, this looks good. We're going to hit accept. We'll come down here and hit merge pull request. Merge, confirming. We'll delete that version of history since we don't need it anymore. And now let's go look back at our original main sacred timeline. And now it says snake case is the best. So that's kind of the quick overview of what it means to create a repository, to add some content to a repository, and then to do a branch to handle parallel work and combining. Now, the one thing you might be wondering about is, well, that's great. I want to do it. It's great in the web browser, but how do I do it locally? That's where you see this green button. And it has cloning. So basically, that will copy that repository to your local computer. You can do everything you want to work on it. And then you can use those commands we mentioned later to send it back up to GitHub. Again, that's a little too technical for today. But if you follow the guide, it'll show you exactly how to do that and work locally, because you're probably going to want to edit your code locally, not just in the web browser. Okay, so let's go a little bit farther. Yeah, the GitHub Foundations course covers those Git basics, those creating a repository basics, but what else do you need to do on a daily basis? You need to handle what tasks you're working on. You need to handle the issues, bugs, features, right? And that's where an issues area and a projects area is really useful to have next to your code. And so you can directly link them together. So you'll see that at the top, there's an area called issues. And here you can create what's called a new issue. And you can describe it, say, let's see, camel case is coming back. Okay. We need to re-standardize on camel case. Python is dying. Okay. So somebody has noticed in the media that Python is no more and Java and C# are coming back. So we need to go back to camel case for all of our projects. So we have this issue here, right? And yeah, we could have a bunch of other issues. We could have bug requests, features, that sort of thing. And so you can keep track of those here, and you can put references to links in the code, all sorts of stuff, but that's for another day. And then you can take it a step farther, and you can say, have like a project manager who's keeping track of all these issues, managing them, what's priority, and that's what's called a project. So I made an example project here that we can look at. And this is probably one of my, it's only like a year or two old at this point, but I really like it. It's made for me working in GitHub a lot easier. So I have one here called DataCamp webinar, a mini project that I set up for preparing for this webinar, right? And what this is here is it's a bunch of those issues, right? So if you were to click on any one of these, you get the text, right? You can do full markdown. You can learn what that is later. You can change the name. You can see who's assigned to it. You can check the status of it. These are all fields that you can manually create and modify. And so what I've done here is I've created a few tasks, meet with DataCamp, make a webinar outline, practice it with my colleagues, give the webinar, which is going on right now. So we should change that to in progress, right? Spam old friends to make sure the attendance isn't 0. Review the feedback that you guys hopefully put in my survey, and then try to convince a bunch of data scientists and data engineers to go to a dance party afterwards. This has been backlogged because nobody has responded to that survey, unfortunately. That's just a joke. Apologies. But what's great about these project boards is they're a little bit different from Excel in the fact that you have the same data, but you can present it in different ways. So for example, here I have a backlog that's kind of showing everything, but I have a status board where I can drag things from one area to the other, right? Maybe you're familiar with Kanban boards. It's a little bit like that. Maybe I'm a project manager and I need to see things in a big picture timeline view. So now I have everything scheduled over time. I can look at it at the month level, the quarter level. I can look at it at the year level. And again, this is all the same data. So you don't have 5 different Excel sheets and sharing tasks up and down the communication chain, right? You can have another one that's just for like reviewing incoming content. You can have a tag dedicated to just the stuff you're working on because maybe there's 10 people working in here. So projects is really great for that. Probably spent a little too much time on that. You can tell I'm excited about those. Okay, so now we know how to create a repository. We know how to add content to the repository and work on it in parallel. We also know how to handle our tasks that we need to work with and how to collaborate with other people. So, all right, how much is all this? How much does it cost to get started? I don't want to have to go to my manager and ask for $1,000 a year just to get started, even though I don't know if I'm going to use the tool. Well, you'll be happy to know there are multiple tiers of GitHub, right? There is a free tier, which is really great. It has unlimited public and private repositories. It already gives you stuff to do the actions, the automations, right? It has stuff to store your own packages if you have like the builds that you want to have stored there, right? You can do issues and projects. That's all in the free account. This says create a free organization because I'm already logged in. But you can create a free account as a user or a free account as a person. Or sorry, as a person or as an organization. And then if you go up to the pro level, it just gives you more stuff to work with. I guess I don't have the link for that at the moment. Yeah, I'm not going to try and find that at the moment. Okay, and then let's say you start getting a little more advanced. You're turning into a business and you need to handle a lot more stuff. That's where team and enterprise can come into play. But we won't talk about those today because you're just getting started with GitHub. Okay, the next one is, again, I'm mentioning all these things because they are in the Foundations exam overview. So this stuff at the top, the Git version control, repository, merge requests, issues, this is kind of like all really deep in there. You're going to have to know how to use these like on a daily basis type of thing for the exam. And then this stuff down here about the different offerings, Copilot, code spaces, advanced security. This is more like an awareness level. So that way, you know, GitHub can do more than just manage your code. So that way you can go from maybe 2x engineer after you have a good version control to 3x engineer when you start automating, to 5x engineer when you start using Copilot, to 10x engineer after you start using this whole suite together, right? So let's take a little bit of an overlook of what is Copilot. So Copilot is the most popular AI pair programmer. For me, it's this kind of fun. I don't want to say like a senior engineer next to me, but like a guy looking over my shoulder all the time, kind of showing me ideas, giving me suggestions of, hey, you could try this, right? Without an opinion, without ego, right? I put kind of like two different roles I see in here, one for senior developers and one for junior developers. So as a senior developer, I think this has helped me attack problems more holistically because I don't have to think about the itty-gritty anymore. I can think kind of like about a whole section, and I can describe that, and it'll generate a rough draft of that whole section. Or for example, it can just generate all the unit tests for me and all the docs for me. It'll get them 80% correct, right? And then I can go through and tweak it and adjust it, because we all know editing something that's already there is way faster than coming up with it from scratch, right? I found that I have to make a lot less templates nowadays, because I can say, hey, Copilot, make me a web application with using this framework and this framework, and it'll give me a really simple version that will run pretty much immediately. I don't have to keep track of the template, make sure the template's always updated and stuff. And then with some tools like Copilot Workspace, you could literally define all your technical requirements from your documentation. Hopefully you're doing this with your customer. And then it might give you a draft of the project pretty quickly, which I think that's been pretty cool. I'm still exploring with that one, so I can't say a whole lot there. And then as a junior developer, I think it's good about, I didn't know that I didn't know something, right? So it can do a good code review for you and be like, by the way, you shouldn't do your loops that way. It won't say it that way, right? It'll just, yeah. It can maybe you're dealing with a new language. Maybe you've never written Python before and you're only used to C#. You can say, hey, how do I do a loop? Or make a loop that does this, and it'll show you the syntax of what that looks like. And so you don't have to use old school Google and Stack Overflow, which was our Copilot back then, to get started. And it'll end up teaching you some best practices that you didn't realize. There's various versions of Copilot directly in your development environment. Copilot Workspace on the web, a web chat on like every repo. There's some new stuff coming out called like Vision, which you can literally do like a hand drafted note of what your GUI might look like, or a PowerPoint, and it'll convert it into code for you. And then there's a newest tool which got announced at GitHub Universe just a little while ago in October, Spark, where it will literally host the web application, do everything for you. It's kind of a tool for making mini applications that are tailored to you. Okay, so that's all me talking. Let's look at the page for a minute here. You'll see there's various tiers. Again, Copilot isn't free, unfortunately, but there is a free trial you can use. So when you go through some of these learning courses we have, maybe time those a little bit. But again, you don't need that to complete the Foundations course. This is just about awareness. They don't actually ask you to try anything. But this is still worth it. I started it a couple years ago, and now I can't live without it. Okay, let's see. This is all marketing stuff, which is great to show the value. But let's look at the features, because you guys are data scientists. You want to see what can it do. So here's an example of starting a conversation in the code base on the website. And you're just saying, hey, I'm new to this code base. I'm a new employee. What does this do? Because the previous people didn't write any documentation. And it can give you an overview of, okay, these are the main areas. This is what it attacks. This is what it does. Here's an example of, you have a completely new, that's really small. Let's zoom in on that. A new button and TypeScript. You've never written TypeScript before, and you need to add a button. And so you said, hey, create a new button, and then it made one for you. Zero knowledge of TypeScript. And now, as a person who's coded before, you can probably tweak and adjust because you're familiar. Tailor-made answers are defined by you. create a new API route for sharing a story. So literally it goes in, finds the files that need to be modified, right? Adds the new method to your file. Feedback without the wait. So we're doing that pull request that we mentioned earlier up here, right? And there's an opportunity to have colleagues give feedback. You can ask colleagues for feedback. Well, you can also ask Copilot to give you feedback. So it's found here, the fetch call is not awaited. This can lead to unexpected behavior, right? So it's saying maybe you should write your code a little differently. And then you have a generic chat here, which you can also do it in your IDE usually. You can just kind of ask it questions, kind of like you would to your senior developer. Okay, I think that's good for Copilot. How are we on time? 10:30, so we got some time still. The next one is code spaces. Let's close a couple tabs here. Code spaces is the solution. Everybody has said this, I promise. It works on my machine. You wrote some code, you gave it to your colleague or your fellow student, and you're like, it worked perfectly fine on my machine. I don't know why it's not working on your machine. This basically solves that problem. And by the way, there is a certain number of computing hours. I don't remember the exact number on the free account. So basically what this does is it is a cloud-based development environment. If you're familiar with dev containers, it's based on that, but essentially allows you to go to any repo. Let's go back to my old repo, the one that we just created today. DataCamp webinar. And you can literally open this project in the web browser, or you can have a link to your local VS Code by just going to code spaces, and then hit create code space on this. Give it a few minutes and it's going to start up a Linux computer in the background. Let's go ahead and let it open it in Visual Studio Code. And so now this Visual Studio Code window oh my gosh. Okay. Apparently it's making me go through the whole sign-in process. This Visual Studio Code window is actually running in the cloud, although at the moment it's because I'm having to sign in multiple times. We're not going to be able to do that today. But it's actually running in the cloud, a whole Linux machine with everything set up, pre-configured. And so everybody who works on this project now is doing the same thing, using the same machine, same settings, same package versions, everything. So you never have to deal with this "it works on my machine again" situation. Yeah, start coding instantly from anywhere in the world. And the other part is, how many times have you spent hours setting up your computer with the right packages and stuff, and this did it all in maybe 30 seconds. See, what are other things that are worth mentioning? Yeah, so let's say you're a web developer, you're like, well, how do I get access to that locally running web version? It will actually forward the ports for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, that's probably good for code spaces. Yeah, seconds to onboard. And I'd like to think of this also as a, instead of having your computer tailored to you now, you can have a dedicated computer tailored to each project. So let's say you have to switch projects. You can have one computer with these packages on it, one computer with these packages on it. I'm doing a whole JavaScript program over here. I have a whole Python program over here, and they're completely unrelated. Okay, the last one, advanced security. Avoid and reduce security debt. So let's take a look at that. Again, these up here are more like awareness level. Even the stuff I'm telling you today might be enough. You don't have to know these. You just have to know they exist. So application security, where found mean fixed. So essentially, we all are working in the open source, working with the open source, even if we don't realize it, because we're using packages and frameworks that have been built by the world. And we don't control that code. So it will check things like Dependabot will look at the supply chain and make sure that there's no security vulnerabilities upstream. We'll look at look through your code base for secrets that you may have accidentally included, like a password, username, password combination, URLs, tokens, that sort of thing. And then you can, as you go up in the paid tiers, you can even do things like not even allow your developers to push or send their tokens up into the cloud. It'll reject their commit. And then code scanning. I think this is a really fascinating one because this will look at how your code works, and it will analyze it and say, hey, you took a variable in from here, you sent it through here, you sent it through there, and then you put it directly in your database without checking it first. So you just allowed somebody to inject code into your database, and it'll alert that. And with Copilot, we've even added autofix. So now it won't even just find that error. It'll suggest a way to fix it. You don't have to accept that, of course, but you're not. It kind of helps with that bogging down of, oh my gosh, we have so many alerts. How do we get through them? You might be able to handle a lot of them by just accepting the autofix. And then same thing with the dependent bot. You might be able to accept the auto bump in the package version. So fixes in minutes, prevent secret leaks. Yeah, so here's an example of that I suggesting a code fix. This is perfectly normal. Most people would write it that way, but by just putting the escape on there, it protects it better. Auto fixes anywhere, solve security debt. And then it also provides at the admin level dashboards, so you can see all the repositories and how many alerts in each of them, who's working on them, that sort of thing. Okay, I'm a little bit out of breath now. That was the introduction to GitHub Foundations exam. So we covered Git version control, the basics, how to set up a repository, how to commit to a repository, how to do a little bit of branching, and then set up that merge request, how to handle your issues and tasks, work together with other people, that you can do this all for free to get started, and how Copilot, Codespaces, and Advanced Security can help accelerate you even faster. I know you guys are all data scientists. You're all very eager into the data world. There's a whole other area that GitHub started just a few months ago, and I'm completely unfamiliar with this. I haven't even touched it yet, called Models. It allows you to experiment with all the latest AI models for free. Let's see if I can even, I didn't even think to get the link for it. Let's see if we can get it. GitHub Models. Okay, this is the docs area, so maybe not the most fancy. Okay, I will let you guys search for that because I still need to learn this myself. But there's actions workflows, there's profiles pages, so you can create a mini static website that represents you or your project. You can use the API and command line interface to automate interaction with GitHub. You can use Wikipedia areas to kind of crowdsource documentation. You can work with your community with a discussion board, forums and such. Let's say you need to deal with other files, maybe for 3D printing and stuff. It has STL support. You can do graphs with Mermaid. You can embed images, right? Let's say you're in game development or something. You can do large file support, so you can start handling binary files, non-text-based files, right? Yeah, so there's a ton more to explore if you want to start Googling. These are just some words that you can Google to help you out. It says learning references. All of these links are down here if you want to learn more. And then in my last minute or two here, I just want to show that if we go back to the certifications page, like let's say you've done it, you've learned it, and you want to actually register, you can click this registration button and it will take you to a login with your GitHub account, and you can register, take any of these exams. The exam provider PSI has in-person testing areas. They do remote testing through your computer. There's all kinds of options. I've pretty much been able to book something within like 48 hours of even wanting to register. So you can pretty much do it at any timeline. You don't have to worry about a particular time of the year to take the test. There are discounts available from DataCamp. I will let Richie talk about that maybe in the offboarding. And then if you're a student, I believe GitHub Foundations is free or will be free soon in the student developer pack. Let's see here. That's probably good on the registration process. Yeah, almost daily options. Yeah, the exams are 2 hours and 75 multiple choice questions. It's not like you have to write code live with somebody watching you. So don't need to worry about that. Okay, and then finally, before I'm done and we jump into questions, I just want to ask everybody to please, if you have feedback or thoughts or how I can make this better, please use this link to give me feedback. I would love to become a better developer and trainer. And finally, I will leave with a challenge of you could win one of these octo lamps that you see right here behind me. It's a smart LED lamp that you can control with your phone through Wi-Fi. Oh yeah, I wasn't on screen yet. It's right here beside me. You may have noticed it already. If you submit a pull request to a public repo that I set up, you'll have to learn what a pull request is maybe. That's part of the challenge. With a tip or idea to help others become a better developer on here, you will earn 5 points. If you answer the feedback survey that we just shared in the chat, you'll earn 1 point. And then at the end of the month, I will pick a winner, contact them, and mail this to them. No cost, 0. In the text file that I shared, I also put some let's be practical for a moment tips. So tips as a data scientist, tips as a coder, and what I might do if I was starting my first project as a data scientist. So I won't go through those. You can kind of read those on your own. And then some frequent questions, maybe about like cost or how would you do this with your personal account and your work account, that sort of thing. And I think that's it from my side, the GitHub side. Richie, Reese, I will let you maybe start throwing some questions at me and we'll see if I can handle them.
All right, super. Thank you so much, Christopher. That's a very cool competition as well. You said you're gonna mail it to anyone, so part of me's just hoping it's be like someone on some like random island off
Yeah,
Antarctica
yeah.
now.
You might have to negotiate a little if you need $1,000 to ship it to you. Yeah, I hadn't considered that part.
All right,
Yeah.
super. For everyone in the audience, please do ask your questions for Christopher now. In the meantime, I've got a few questions for you. So I thought there are several different certifications there. So there's foundations, you've got actions, and all the other ones. Who needs each of the different certifications? Are there any particular like roles or industries where it becomes important?
Yeah. I would say anybody who has not used GitHub before, I would recommend GitHub Foundations. Like that's students, that's early software engineers, that's early data scientists. Pretty much anybody is good for that. Maybe if you're up in the executive level and stuff, you don't really need to know those foundational Git technologies. At the actions level, I would say you're probably got a good process running. You like your little project and you're noticing that you're spending too much time doing the boring stuff, right? You're like, okay, I do this, I run the test, and I wait 10 minutes. I do this, I run the test, I wait 10 minutes, right? So if you're noticing you're wasting a lot of time on boilerplate things, hit that GitHub Actions because you'll find that it saves you a bunch of times. Let's say you're working with a lot of different levels of engineers and scientists, and maybe you're working across fields and people don't necessarily know best coding practices. That's where you probably want to do GitHub Advanced Security because since everybody has a different background, they don't necessarily know what's dangerous, right? And so that can help protect your project from having that moment of, oh, we just had a cyber attack, because we have the best scientists in the world, but we don't have necessarily the best software engineers in the world. And so we just did a trivial mistake, right? And then GitHub admin is going to be like, you don't necessarily need to know anything about GitHub or sorry, Git or coding, but you do need to know who's going to do the billing, how you're going to handle the usage. You're going to make sure people aren't running things for 1,000 hours, right? So this could be for like the managers, the executives, GitHub admin. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's pretty useful. So it seems like most people you're going to want to start with GitHub Foundations, and then once you kind of used it a bit more, then if you have a particular role, then one of the other ones is good to follow up on.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so I guess my next question is, how does getting one of these qualifications help your career? How's it going to benefit you?
Yeah, so helping out your career, I think we're in a world where you can be great at your job, but but that's not enough. You also have to have proof, and you need to have justification for the proposal for the work that you're doing, right? So maybe you don't see how it helps you out a lot, but maybe when you have these and your manager is trying to propose a bid for a project, they could say, hey, every person on our staff is GitHub certified. And so then that gives them confidence when they're bidding for projects, for example, that they know what they're doing, right? Because it's not that they just claim at it. And I don't have time to review every one of their past projects, right? So I know that they're GitHub certified, they're Microsoft certified, they're AWS certified, whatever, right? It helps with that. And I will say that even though I knew GitHub very well coming through these courses, I've taken all 5 courses myself. Even I picked up stuff. I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know it could do that, right? So yeah.
That's interesting, the idea on like bidding on stuff. So yeah, certainly I found that if anyone who works in like consultancies or like
Oh,
contract
absolutely.
software houses, things like that, they just collect qualifications like they're going out of fashion. So because they have to demonstrate their skills to other people in some way. But yeah, I think for like job seekers more generally, just having that's going to help you get a foot in the door.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I guess next question is like, how long does it take to go from I know nothing about Git or GitHub to I can pass GitHub Foundations? Like, how much time do you need to set aside for this?
Well, that's a really hard question for me because I'm so old in it. I don't know what I don't know anymore. I would say completely new. If you don't have somebody to help you out, it could take a little while, like maybe a month. But if you have a senior developer or you have a friend who's already in the coding space, it shouldn't take that. I mean, it depends on how much time you can give to it. But I think you can do it in a couple weeks. Like you saw that I created a repo, I added some changes to it in the web browser in minutes, right? Between YouTube videos and the actual course, I think the actual course, the GitHub Foundations course, let's jump back to that. On MS Learn, I think it's rated at like, yeah, 30 minutes here, an hour and a half there, 23 minutes, 20 minutes, 27 minutes. So yeah, maybe this is like 5 hours of actual teaching.
Okay. Yeah, I was just looking at the DataCamp tracks. We got.
Oh yeah, I shouldn't be showing that one. I apologize.
All right, yeah, we got 5 courses, but they're relatively short, and then plus a tutorial and yeah, a couple of resources. So yeah, all right. Maybe like it's gonna be like 15 hours plus time to practice on your own. So yeah, I can see how you could get through this in a month or so.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
mean, this says 17 minutes read, and I think that's about how long it took me to read it. But I'm familiar with it. So if you're kind of Googling stuff as you go, a half hour for this one, then a half hour for the next one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Nice. Let's go to a couple of audience questions.
Yay.
So this question from an anonymous LinkedIn user. Oh, I do love the Christmas font. Okay. So Chris asked, the user asked, is there a best practice for creating branches in Git? So yeah, Git branching strategy. I know there are just whole books written on this. Do you want to give us like the brief overview of like how do you decide how you go making branches?
Yeah. So like you said, there's whole books dedicated to this subject probably. But the one thing I will say to keep it in like the purpose for it is rather than it has to be this font or whatever, or this all lowercase, is whatever is consistent within your team and whatever allows you to identify the person who's working on it and what the feature is that they're working on. As long as it does those 3 things and it's consistent, then I think it's doing its purpose. Because when I look at all the branches that are going on, I want to quickly know who's doing it and I want to know what they're doing. That's what I want out of it. Otherwise, whether you want to use camel case or snake case or the hyphens between letters or words, that's up to you. Yeah, as long as you're all doing the same thing, because it is a mess when everybody's different. It's really hard to read. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So just talk to your team members and make sure you're all doing the same
Just
sort of
on the
thing.
same page about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, like, yeah, because you get some teams where they're like, okay, we have like different branches for different features, and sometimes it's just like everything goes into like a development branch, and then gradually things get pushed to like the master branch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the question is referring to that, that's a whole different. Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't thinking about the whole like, do you create feature branches? Do you create staging branches? Do you create leasing branches? There are some great resources on that, and that's where you have to pick up a book and see what fits with your planned development workflow. Just like again, pick one and make sure everybody's doing the same thing.
Okay, yeah. Talking to colleagues, terrible stuff.
Yeah, right. Don't commit. I will say, don't commit directly to main though.
Okay,
That's never a good idea.
all right. Next question comes from Karen. So Karen says, I'm in school or I guess university studying data analytics. I don't want to be a data scientist. Is it still beneficial for me to use GitHub? So yeah, when do you need to care about GitHub? When is it like, well, actually, this isn't going to be useful to me?
Yeah. So I jokingly say the moment you realize you want to keep something, you should be using GitHub or at least Git, because you never we will if you can avoid this, you'll be like so much better than the rest of us. Where like you're working on something and you're like, God dang it, it was working perfect yesterday. I don't know what I changed. I broke it. Right. The moment you realize like, oh, this is something I like, this is running the way I want it, that's when you should start using Git and GitHub, because it'll lock it in, it'll keep it. You can add a note to it. This is why I did it. This is the way it's supposed to work. And then you can keep playing, right? And that's true for anything. Like that can be writing code, that could be writing a book, right? Because it's text-based, right? You could write a book in here and say, hey, I wrote this version of the chapter, I like it. And then you come back and change it 6 months later. It's like, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, yeah. So that is a good point. That it goes beyond just managing code into like managing text documents as well. So yeah, I've written several books that are tracked with Git Version Control.
Yeah.
I guess for the point around being a data analyst, if you are working with these sort of binary files, so things like Power BI or Tableau sort of workbooks, do you still want to use Git for that, or do you want something else to manage how you are working with that stuff?
When you start getting into the non-text based stuff, you gotta really probably read more about it and learn about like Git large file system to handle binaries, because you just got to be more careful, because like it's still good for that version control and locking it in, but you don't get any of those nice features about seeing the difference between one version and the next, right? You're gonna have to rely on your notes or maybe a text file you put next to it that describes how it works, right? Yeah.
Okay, actually, since we're a bit short on audience questions, I have a few more for you. So yeah, everyone in the audience, please do ask your
You guys
questions.
did a good job, I think.
We got 5 minutes left. So I guess my question is like, when do you need to start learning about this stuff? Like, is it something you do like before you start learning all your sort of programming skills, or like, do you want to learn some Python first and then start learning about Git and GitHub? What's the order you do things in?
Yeah, I'd say this is kind of like the chicken and egg scenario, right? Because it's like, well, I don't have any code. I don't know how to write any code, so why would I want to keep some code, right? And I would say it's kind of like that depth versus breadth conversation, right? So as a developer, as a data scientist, as a data engineer, you're never going to be able to just do data engineering. You're never going to be able to just do document writing, right? You're going to have to learn a little bit of everything. And so you're going to feel like you're in that imposter syndrome, unable to do stuff area until you've built up at least like a fundamental basics of each category. So I would say wherever you're most motivated right now, right? Like let's say you're really gung ho about the coding part of it, go learn the coding part of it. Don't worry about what you're going to keep, what you're not going to keep, what's the right practices. Just go play, learn. And then when you hit that moment, you're like, oh, I really like this, I want to keep it. Maybe that will push you into that motivation of like, oh, I should go learn GitHub now because I don't want to ever lose this, or this is so cool, I want to share it with the world, right? And so now I'm going to go use that energy to learn a little bit about Git and GitHub. And then next one for how to document well, how to do graphs well, how to scale, right? And just repeat that little process until you have enough breadth to make a project useful.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Certainly, I find that like one of the big advantages of version control is it lets me do bigger projects. So if I'm like a lot of data analyses, you can do that pretty short. You can write a couple of pages of R or Python, SQL, whatever, and you've got your answer, and you don't necessarily need like complicated sort of management for that. But as soon as you start wanting to build something bigger, like if you want to create a Python package, something that's reusable, that's the point where you absolutely do.
Yeah, and also if you want to start working with another person, like maybe you have made a cool project and they ask you, hey, how do I use this? How can I help you? I have a cool idea for it, right? That's absolutely when you need to start learning GitHub for the collaboration features.
Definitely. Yeah,
because I promise you do not want to give them a zip copy of it, have them change it and send it back to you. That will make you lose more hair than I've lost.
Right. Okay, we have got one more question from the audience. So this comes from Krishna. So Krishna asks, what's more convenient, using the commands feature or interacting with the user interface of GitHub while manipulating the contents in it? So yeah, I guess
I send my
different
commands
ways
into
of doing
the
things.
CLI. Yeah. Uh, it's kind of funny because I go back and forth all the time. Like I'll just be in a mood where I'm using VS Code and I'm just using the GUI in VS Code, and then I'll for a week just start using the CLI. I think it's I don't. I think that personally, if I for a beginner, absolutely use the GUIs. You use the one built into Visual Studio Code into Visual Studio to JetBrains, because it'll kind of help you see the flow of it. Because when it's command line based, you have to know that like, oh, I should use this command here or this command here. Whereas you can't, you don't have to run git status when you're in VS Code. It'll just show you that the file's orange and you click on it and then it shows you the difference between the past version and the first version. And then you can highlight an area and say, commit this area, right? Like, or stage this area and then commit it. It's like really straightforward. So I would probably say, like, without thinking about it a lot, I would say start with the one in your IDE to kind of get a sense of what the different commands do. And then when you start having to get a little more advanced, like you want to rewrite the history, that's when you can start learning more about the CLI, because the IDEs will only give you the fundamentals. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff that it can do, that like collaborators. I doubt all IDEs can make it to where two people submitted this code instead of one. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly gets incredibly powerful, but it can spend months and months and months learning all about it. But like,
You'll never become an expert on Git unless you're the guy helping make Git, and even then, you probably won't know everything.
Yeah. So as long as you got like git add, git commit, push pull in it, that's probably going to get you
That's
like
basically
most
all
of the
you're
way
using.
for day to day.
Definitely 80-20 rule on that. Yeah.
All right, super. And with that, I think we're about at time. So let's wrap up. Before everyone dashes off, I want to say we've got 2 more webinars this week before we break for the holidays. So if you come back tomorrow, we're going to be talking about hiring and retaining AI talent. So how do you make sure you get hold of people who can actually work with AI? On Thursday, we've got a session on setting up data academies. And then all done till January. So yeah, okay. Thank you once again, Christopher. That's very cool stuff. I hope everyone in the audience is now inspired to learn a bit about Git, learn a bit about GitHub, and then go and take the GitHub Foundations qualification. It's going to stand you a good stead for your career. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. I hope to see you all again later in the week, or otherwise, I shall see you again in January. All right. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.